Have you ever completed an absolutely amazing fantasy series and then go online to see what other folks are saying about it just to discover that no one's even talking about it? Yeah, that's an underrated fantasy series. So, today I will be going over my top 5 most underrated fantasy book series. When putting together this list, I try to pick book series from various different subgenres to really display the range of the fantasy genre and increase my chances of finding you your next favorite fantasy series. Also, since you may not have read some of these series but may intend to, I will keep my discussions on them as spoiler-free as possible. But before I begin, these videos do take a lot of time to put together. So if I show some love to a series that you really like or help you discover a new series to read, it would mean a lot to me if you subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Number 5. Steelhaven by Richard Ford. So, unlike other series on this list, Richard Ford's Steelhaven is probably his best known work. Steelhaven is a grimdark fantasy series. If you're not familiar with this genre of fantasy, let me enlighten you. Grimdark fantasy is a genre that focuses primarily on moral ambiguity, gritty realism, and bleakness. It shouldn't be confused with dark fantasy, which ties fantasy and horror together. Steelhaven is a trilogy that focuses primarily on the city of Steelhaven, which the series is named after. 3 books are Herald of the Storm, The Shattered Crown, and Lord of Ashes. The first book in the series introduces our main point of view characters. Like they were pulled straight from a game of D&D, we have Mausa Mabasi, our spy, our young princess, Janessa, Kyra Stormfall, our warrior, Rag, our young child in the streets, Noble Jack, our blacksmith, Merrick Ryder, our drunk, River, our assassin, and Welian, our aspiring mage. The first book focuses on these characters, drawing out their stories and fleshing out the port city of Steelhaven through their point of views. I can't tell you how much I prefer this to pages describing towers and shops. There's a mention of a conflict going on in the background of the first book, but it's not until the second book does it actually come to roost. Amon Tugga unites the fractured Kurta tribes and is cutting a bloody path towards Steelhaven. The second book focuses on that approach, the shifting power dynamics within Steelhaven that I won't spoil for you, and the interactions between the characters. As for the third book, I can't say much about it without spoiling the whole thing. What I will say is that Amon Tugga has arrived to take the city of Steelhaven, and the book addresses the main conflicts and plot points initiated in the prior 2 books. So what makes this series worth a read? Well, for one, it's the characters. There are a lot of them, and at times it makes me think I'm reading a George R.R. Martin book. But they are fleshed out, you understand their motives, and they really play well off one another. More than that, Ford does a good job of interlinking their stories into one to create an interesting story overall. Also, I really like the idea that everything about the story is about Steelhaven itself. The majority of the series takes place in Steelhaven. All the POV characters are housed in the city. A lot of their motives are tied to Steelhaven. Where most books are focused on resolving the conflicts of its characters, the Steelhaven series takes a slightly different approach and makes the primary focus about resolving the conflicts of Steelhaven itself. So, if you're someone that's never read a grimdark fantasy series and are looking for one to start with, you should consider adding Steelhaven to your library. Number 4. The Dagger and Coin by Daniel Abraham. Daniel Abraham is best known for his Long Price Quartet and the Expanse series. The Expanse series in particular is a great science fiction series that you should totally read if you're willing to dip your toes into the genre. Next to those series, his Dagger and Coin series is often overlooked. Spanning the trilogy structure, the Dagger and Coin series is a quintet. The 5 books are The Dragon's Path, The King's Blood, The Tyrant's Law, The Widow's House, and The Spider's House. So hearing those 5 titles, you may be thinking, why is it called the Dagger and the Coin series? None of those titles even mention the word dagger or coin. The answer lies in the way wars can be won. You can use your physical strength, the dagger if you will, or the money route, the coin if you will. The first book in this series essentially introduces the 4 main point of view characters. You have Citron, a banker, Marcus, a jaded mercenary, Getter, an idealistic noble, and Dawson, a noble aristocrat. The book brings them together and establishes not only the characters, but the relationships, but also the events that will unfold in Antia and its capital city of Camnopol. In an attempt to avoid as much spoilers as possible, I'll briefly summarize the other books. The second book establishes the civil war that will take place in Camnopol. Book 3 deals with the repercussions of the events of Book 2. Book 4 is essentially the Dark Knight quote, "It's always darkest before the dawn," and Book 5 resolves the conflicts established in the prior books. Now, what makes this series so good? First and foremost, it's the world building. Abraham doesn't really beat you over the head with his world building. The world is pretty much a character of the series, and you learn so much about it through the eyes of his characters. Speaking of characters, Citron and Getter are amazing characters. Citron is such a good female character. She's not a badass with a sword that can dice up her enemies. She's a banker, and a damn good one, and she uses that knowledge to her advantage. Then there's Getter. I can't say much about him without spoiling anything for you, but he's the most frustrating character I've read in a long time because the choices that he makes fills you with so much rage and anger, yet you understand the character. You care about the things he cares about. You feel for him. He drives me absolutely insane, but it's in the best possible way. Now, I'll have to warn you, the series is a slow burn. Things take time to progress and may be off-putting to a lot of you. But if you stick with it, you'll have a really good fantasy series with memorable characters to put on your shelf. Number 3, Shattered Sea by Joe Abercrombie. So, the mere mention of the name Joe Abercrombie will make you think of the First Law series. The way I see it, the First Law series is like that older brother that's the school's star quarterback who just hogs all the limelight from his younger brother, so no one notices his quiet confidence and capabilities. The Shattered Sea trilogy is that younger brother. So what is the Shattered Sea trilogy? Well, it's a young adult fantasy series that takes place in different areas around a body of water called the Shattered Sea. At first glance, this world appears to be high fantasy with the mention of elf relics and magic. But looks can be deceiving. I'll leave it at that so I don't want to spoil anything for you. The first book in the series is called Half a King and follows the character named Yarvi. A mere boy with a crippled hand, he's made king of a warrior and coin society called Getland after the murder of his father and older brother. Because of his infirmity, this causes problems. Keeping the spoiler free, the book follows his trials and tribulations to avenge his father and his brother. Book 2 is called Half the World and focuses on two different characters called Thorn and Brand. Both Thorn and Brand are warriors that failed to make it as warriors of Getland for reasons that I won't spoil for you, and end up traveling with Yarvi in his pursuit of forging alliances for Getland. The final book in the series is called Half a War and focuses on three different characters called Princess Gara, who's a princess of one of Getland's allies, Cole, who's Yarvi's apprentice, and Rate, the sword bearer of the king of one of Getland's allies. The book details the war that Getland and its allies wages against the High King of the Shattered Sea. Now, what makes this book so good is its pace. The first book in particular doesn't waste words or pages. Events unfold quickly and logically. The logic part is really key. I've read a lot of books where the plot drags the characters forward, and I don't enjoy the books at all. They feel contrived and illogical. The Shattered Sea, though, is different. The characters move the plot forward. This makes the story feel much more logical because you can sit there and say, yeah, because of this thing that happened to him, I can see why he would make the choice in that situation. It makes it such a good read because of that. There are also several really interesting twists across all three books, which I won't spoil for you, but trust me, the twist about the truth about how the world itself was created was really well done. Also, I have to mention Abercrombie's skill in regards to writing fighting scenes. It's not guy 1 hit guy 2 with sword, then guy 2 dies, now guy 1 proceeds to hit guy 3 with sword. Nope, it's way more visceral than that. The heroes give as good as they take, and it's great to see heroes actually get their asses kicked now and then and have to rely on other means to beating their opponents outside of physical ones. Now, I have to admit, I wasn't a huge fan of the third book. That's mostly because of how much I liked the first two. Still, that shouldn't stop you. The Shattered Sea trilogy deserves the limelight in your library. Number 2, The Black Company by Glenn Cook. So, on a lot of best fantasy series of all time lists, you'll often see Malazan Book of the Fallen series make an appearance representing the military fantasy subgenre. For those of you who aren't familiar with the military fantasy subgenre, this genre focuses on the life cycle of war in a fantasy setting. So you'll see how the conflict is established, the actual violence during the conflict, and then the aftermath. While the Malazan Book of the Fallen series is well known and beloved, The Black Company is what I like to call the granddaddy of the genre. The first book was written in 1984, and the series itself follows a mercenary group known as the Black Company over a span of 40 or 50 years of its storied existence. There are 9 main books in the series and an interlude book that takes place between the events of books 1 and 2, and a spin-off that takes place after book 3 that focuses on a set of characters that broke off from the Black Company unit. Now personally, I don't count the interlude and the spin-off books amongst the main series since they're not required reads to understand and enjoy the series. Without spoiling anything in the plot, the 9 main books are broken up into anthologies. The Books of the North covers books 1 through 3 and focuses primarily on the company's service to Lady and the Empire. The Books of the South covers books 4 and 5 and details the company's quest to return home to Kadavar. And finally, the Books of the Glittering Stone covers books 7 through 9 and covers the company's war against its enemies, Soulcatcher, Mogaba, Kina, and her deceivers. So why do I like this series? Well, it's really not like anything I've ever read before, to be honest. Members of the Black Company are just not nice people. They've done questionable things, and their service to the lady in the first 3 books is basically akin to serving Emperor Palpatine in Star Wars. Also, it's told primarily through the point of view of analyst characters. The analyst in the Black Company is the person who is charged with recording the events of the Black Company as they live it. So all the stories are told primarily from their viewpoint, which creates an interesting dynamic. For instance, Croker, who is the main analyst, is a man of sarcastic wit that I can really appreciate. But other analysts like Sleepy are more businesslike. Because of that, each of them focuses on different things as analysts and it really makes you feel like you're reading the writings of different people. Beyond just the structure of how the series is told, this is a really dark series. Being a military fantasy series, several battles occur throughout the series, and characters die, but you don't get these going out a blaze of glory scenes. There's a realism to it, and that major characters will die, and literally all you'll get is a sentence or two stating that they've died and how. It's jarring, but makes sense in a war setting. People die in war. A lot of times there's nothing dramatic about it, it just happens. And I like that a lot about this book. This series can be best described as a series of mean people who are bound by their loyalty to this unit called the Black Company that will do mean things to preserve that bond. It's an interesting take on the fantasy genre and you should definitely add it to your library. Number 1, Troy by David Gemmell. Most of you probably know about the story of Troy from Homer's Iliad. For those of you not in the know, it's an epic poem that details, in part, the fall of the great city of Troy to the cunning and brutality of the Greeks, while the gods raged both in the foreground and the background. David Gemmell's Troy series is a retelling of that classic, but with a different take on it. For one, while many of the main characters are pulled directly from the Iliad, so you'll see Achilles, Hector, Andromache, Priam, Aeneas, Agamemnon, Helen, Odysseus, they're much different in Gemmell's series. For instance, the gods don't play a role at all in the conflict in Gemmell's retelling. The duel between Hector and Achilles is altered to introduce mortal treachery. Helen isn't portrayed as a beauty, but more as a simple lady. Odysseus, on the other hand, is introduced as a traveling tradesman, which is fitting for the character. The Trojan horse is completely reimagined, and I approve wholeheartedly of what Gemmell did with it. Priam isn't a wise and benevolent ruler, but a ruler gone mad. There are so many changes in the series that the series feels fresh despite me knowing as the reader how the story already unfolds. And that is one of the best compliments that I can give the series. In terms of writing, the fighting scenes are well done. David Gemmell has always been one of my favorite writers in terms of writing fight scenes, and the fighting here is really done well. One of the things I can't stress enough about this series is how human it feels. By throwing out all the gods in his retelling, this is a very human retelling of the story of Troy. That makes all of the high and low points of the characters' stories feel much more impactful. So, whether you like the story of Troy or not from the Iliad, none of that should bar you from enjoying the series, and I can't recommend it enough. So that's my list of the 5 most underrated fantasy series. I hope it helps you discover a new series to read or gives the proper respect to a series that you already enjoy. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel and leaving a like. And with that, I will see you all in the next one.